A profound shift is happening across Europe's eastern flank. 5 NATO countries have made a difficult and controversial decision. Poland, Finland, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia are bringing back anti-personnel landmines. This move signals a dramatic change in defense policy. It is a direct response to the perceived threat from Russia. These nations feel their security is at risk. They believe they must take every possible measure to protect their borders and their sovereignty. This choice marks a significant departure from decades of international efforts to ban these weapons entirely. These 5 nations share a border with either Russia or its close ally, Belarus. They have watched the war in Ukraine with growing alarm. The events of the conflict have provided them with hard lessons about modern warfare. They now plan to create a long, fortified line of defense. This barrier will stretch for over 2,000 miles, from the cold of Finnish Lapland down to Poland. Landmines are set to become a central part of this new defensive wall. The decision reflects a grim new reality in European security, where old fears have resurfaced with startling intensity. The announcement to reintroduce these weapons was not made lightly. It came after months of debate and strategic reassessment within military and political circles. These countries see the move as a necessary deterrent. They hope that the presence of vast minefields will make any potential aggressor think twice before launching an attack. The goal is to make their territory too costly and difficult to invade. This strategic calculation, however, comes at a high price, reversing years of progress in humanitarian law and creating new dangers for the future. This return to landmines represents a stark and unsettling trend. It shows that the geopolitical landscape of Europe has been fundamentally altered. The era of post-Cold War optimism has given way to a period of heightened tension and military preparedness. The decision by these NATO members could encourage other nations to reconsider their own positions on landmines. It is a clear sign that the lessons from Ukraine are reshaping military doctrines across the continent, prioritizing national defense above long-standing international agreements aimed at protecting civilians from the horrors of war. The Ottawa Treaty is a landmark international agreement. Its official name is the Convention on the Prohibition of the Use, Stockpiling, Production and Transfer of Anti-Personnel Mines, and on their destruction. It was signed in 1997. The treaty's main goal was to end the suffering caused by anti-personnel landmines. These weapons are indiscriminate. They cannot tell the difference between a soldier and a child. The treaty bans their use, production, and stockpiling. Countries that signed it also agreed to destroy their existing stockpiles and to clear mined areas on their land. For over 2 decades, the Ottawa Treaty stood as a major success for international humanitarian law. Over 160 nations became parties to the agreement, committing to a world free of these deadly devices. Signatories included most of Europe, Africa, and Latin America. The treaty helped to dramatically reduce the number of new landmines being laid around the world. It also spurred massive international efforts to demine contaminated land, saving countless lives. The treaty created a powerful global norm against the use of anti-personnel mines, making their deployment socially and politically unacceptable for most of the world. However, some of the world's largest military powers never joined the treaty. The United States, Russia, and China did not sign it in 1997. They argued that they needed landmines for their national defense strategies. Their refusal to join created a significant gap in the treaty's global reach. Russia, in particular, is believed to hold the world's largest stockpile of anti-personnel mines, estimated to be over 26 million. This meant that the threat posed by these weapons never truly disappeared, especially along the borders of non-signatory states. Now, the foundation of the treaty is cracking. Between late 2024 and mid-2025, Poland, Finland, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia all announced their formal withdrawal. Ukraine, a signatory since 2005, also officially left the treaty in June 2025. These countries argue that the security environment has changed so drastically that they can no longer abide by the treaty's restrictions. They claim that facing an adversary like Russia, which never signed the treaty and uses mines extensively, leaves them at a dangerous disadvantage. Their withdrawal is seen as a major blow to the global disarmament movement. The war in Ukraine has become a brutal showcase for the effectiveness of landmines. Both sides have used them on a massive scale. This has fundamentally changed how the war is fought. In the early days of the invasion in 2022, Ukraine used its stockpiles of Soviet-era mines to great effect. As Russian armored columns advanced toward Kiev, Ukrainian forces laid anti-tank mines along key roads and bridges. These minefields slowed the Russian advance, broke up their formations, and channeled them into ambushes. This defensive use of mines was crucial in helping Ukraine stop the initial assault on its capital. Russia, in turn, has used mines to build some of the most extensive defensive fortifications seen since the First World War. When Ukraine launched its major counter-offensive in the summer of 2023, it ran into a wall of Russian minefields. These defenses were incredibly dense, sometimes with several mines per square meter. They were layered with different types of mines, including anti-personnel and anti-tank varieties, and often protected by artillery and drone surveillance. Russian military leaders called these defenses insurmountable. They successfully stopped the Ukrainian push, grinding the offensive to a halt and inflicting heavy losses on Ukrainian troops and equipment. The widespread use of mines has made large-scale, fast-moving attacks nearly impossible. This has rendered traditional maneuver warfare, the kind of combined arms tactics favored by NATO, largely ineffective. Instead, the conflict has become a slow, grinding war of attrition. Armies are unable to make significant breakthroughs because the ground is too dangerous to cross. The front lines have become largely static, with both sides entrenched behind massive mine belts. The war is now dominated by long-range artillery duels, drone strikes, and small-scale infantry assaults, as mines have taken away the element of surprise and movement. Ukraine's experience has been a key factor in the decision of its neighbors to re-embrace landmines. They have seen how a well-prepared mine defense can stop a powerful invading force. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky justified his country's withdrawal from the Ottawa Treaty by stating that anti-personnel mines very often have no alternative as a tool for defense. The lesson learned is that in a ground war against a larger army, mines can be a powerful equalizer. They can buy precious time, disrupt enemy plans, and make an invasion prohibitively costly for the attacker. The 5 NATO countries bordering Russia see landmines as an essential part of a new defense strategy. This strategy is often called defense in depth. It involves creating multiple layers of obstacles to slow down and weaken an invading army. Mines are a key component of this approach. They are relatively cheap to produce and can be deployed over vast areas. This makes them a cost-effective way to fortify a long border. For these countries, creating a physical barrier that can halt tanks and infantry is now a top priority. They believe minefields will make their territory a much harder target. Mines are powerful force multipliers. This means that a small number of soldiers can use mines to defend a large area. This is especially important for countries with smaller armies compared to a potential adversary like Russia. By laying extensive minefields, they can free up their soldiers to concentrate on other tasks. The mines act as a silent, ever-vigilant sentry. They deny the enemy freedom of movement and force them into predictable paths, where they can be more easily targeted by artillery or anti-tank weapons. This turns the terrain itself into a weapon against the invader. the psychological impact of minefields is also a significant factor. The knowledge that the ground is saturated with hidden explosives has a powerful effect on the morale of attacking soldiers. It creates fear and uncertainty, slowing down movement and making every step a potential risk. This hesitation can disrupt the timing and coordination of an attack, giving defenders a critical advantage. The goal is not just to destroy enemy vehicles and personnel, but also to break their will to advance. The constant threat of a sudden, violent explosion can wear down even the most disciplined troops. Ultimately, these nations believe that landmines are a credible deterrent. By announcing their intention to build a 2,000-mile mined barrier, they are sending a clear message to Moscow. The message is that any aggression will be met with fierce and costly resistance from the very first step across the border. They hope this will prevent a conflict from ever starting. In their view, the security situation has become so dire that the defensive benefits of landmines now outweigh the humanitarian commitments they made in the past. It is a grim calculation based on the hard realities of geography and military power. So, it is important to understand that not all mines are the same. There are, two main categories: anti-tank mines and anti-personnel mines. The Ottawa Treaty only bans anti-personnel mines. Anti-tank, or AT, mines are not covered by the treaty and are considered by many to be, legitimate weapons of war. AT mines are designed to be triggered by the weight of a heavy vehicle, such as a tank or an armored personnel carrier. They contain a large explosive charge, capable of destroying or disabling a vehicle. They require significant pressure, usually over 100 kilograms, to detonate. Anti-personnel, or AP mines, on the other hand, are the focus of the international ban. These mines are much smaller and are designed to be triggered by a person. They can be detonated by someone stepping on them, tripping a wire, or disturbing them in some way. AP mines are not necessarily designed to kill. Often, their purpose is to maim and injure. A wounded soldier requires other soldiers to provide aid and evacuate them, which puts more strain on the enemy's resources than a single death. This is what makes them particularly insidious weapons on the battlefield. The key reason anti-personnel mines are banned is their indiscriminate nature. A landmine cannot distinguish between a soldier and a civilian. A child running through a field or a farmer working their land can trigger a mine just as easily as an enemy combatant. This is why they continue to cause so much harm long after a conflict has ended. They remain active and deadly for decades, silently waiting beneath the soil. This legacy of contamination makes vast areas of land unusable and poses a constant threat to communities trying to rebuild their lives after a war. The 5 NATO countries withdrawing from the Ottawa Treaty are specifically seeking to reintroduce anti-personnel mines. They argue that anti-tank mines alone are not enough. They claim that enemy soldiers can simply clear paths through an AT minefield on foot. By mixing anti-personnel mines in with the anti-tank mines, they create a much more complex and dangerous obstacle. This makes it extremely difficult and slow for enemy engineers to clear a path, ensuring the defensive barrier remains effective. This military logic, however, directly clashes with the humanitarian principles that led to the AP mine ban in the first place. The greatest tragedy of landmines is the devastating and lasting impact they have on civilians. These weapons are, honestly, the ultimate silent killer, long after the soldiers have gone home. A mine buried in a field does not know that a peace treaty has been signed. It remains active, just waiting for pressure. This means that for years, and even decades, ordinary people live under the constant threat of death or horrific injury. Farmers cannot plow their fields. Children cannot play in the open. Refugees cannot return to their villages. The land itself, in a way, becomes an enemy to the people who live on it. The injuries caused by anti-personnel mines are particularly gruesome. They are designed to blast upwards, shredding the victim's lower limbs. Survivors often require amputations and face a lifetime of disability and psychological trauma. In countries with limited medical resources, these injuries are often a death sentence. According to the Landmine and Cluster Munition Monitor, civilians make up the vast majority of casualties from mines and explosive remnants of war. In 2023, a staggering 84% of the nearly 6,000 recorded casualties were civilians, and a large portion of them were children. Ukraine now provides a harrowing example of this long-term danger. It is now widely considered to be the most heavily mined country in the world. An area larger than the entire United Kingdom is thought to be contaminated with mines and unexploded ordnance. This contamination will cripple Ukraine's recovery for generations. Clearing these millions of mines is a slow, dangerous, and incredibly expensive process. It will take decades and billions of dollars. In the meantime, Ukrainian civilians will continue to pay the price for the weapons used to defend their land. The decision by the 5 NATO states to reintroduce landmines means they are knowingly accepting this future for their own lands. While they plan to use them in clearly marked and fenced-off border zones, history shows that such measures are often not enough. Fences decay, warning signs disappear, and the precise location of every mine can be lost over time. Floods and soil erosion can move mines to new, unexpected locations. The decision to lay these mines today is a decision to endanger their own great-grandchildren, creating a deadly legacy that will outlast the current political tensions. The return of landmines is happening alongside a revolution in military technology. The war in Ukraine has shown how old weapons can be combined with new systems to create even deadlier threats. One of the most significant developments is the use of drones to deploy landmines. Traditionally, laying a minefield was a slow and dangerous task for combat engineers who had to place each mine by hand. Now drones can fly over an area and quickly drop specialized mines, creating a minefield in minutes. This changes the dynamics of the battlefield completely. This new method of deployment is known as remote mine laying. It allows an army to quickly block an enemy's path or to trap enemy forces that have already advanced. For example, a drone can drop mines behind an enemy tank column, cutting off its retreat. This tactic can turn a successful advance into a deadly trap. Russia and Ukraine have both used these systems, which can scatter hundreds of small anti-personnel or anti-tank mines over a wide area from the air. This makes the location of minefields far less predictable and much harder to map and clear later on. The combination of low-tech mines and high-tech drones is seen as having war-deciding potential. It gives commanders a flexible and responsive tool to shape the battlefield in real time. They are no longer limited to static, pre-planned minefields. Instead, they can create instant obstacles wherever they are needed most. This speed and efficiency make mines an even more attractive option for armies looking to bolster their defenses. The 5 NATO countries exploring the use of landmines are also investing heavily in drone technology, suggesting they will adopt these modern deployment tactics. However, this technological evolution also makes landmines even more dangerous for civilians. When mines are scattered from the air, it is almost impossible to accurately record their locations. This makes future clearance efforts a nightmare. Furthermore, some of these remotely delivered mines are designed with self-destruct or self-deactivation features, but these mechanisms often have a high failure rate. This means that many non-persistent mines actually persist in the environment for years, posing the same long-term threat as older, simpler models. Technology has made the delivery of mines more efficient, but it has not solved the fundamental humanitarian problem they create. The decision by the 5 NATO countries to withdraw from the Ottawa Treaty has been met with swift and strong condemnation from human rights organizations. Groups like Amnesty International, Humanity and Inclusion, and the International Campaign to Ban Landmines have described the move as a, disturbing step backwards. They argue that this decision undermines decades of work to protect civilians in conflict zones. These organizations have spent years documenting the horrific impact of landmines on ordinary people and campaigning for their complete eradication. They see this reversal as a betrayal of that progress. Human rights advocates warn that reintroducing anti-personnel mines will inevitably lead to more civilian casualties. They point to the statistics, which consistently show that civilians bear the brunt of the harm caused by these weapons. The idea that minefields can be perfectly contained and marked is a dangerous fiction, they argue. In the chaos of war and in the years that follow, these weapons will find their way into communities and farmlands. The human cost, they insist, is simply too high to justify any perceived military advantage. They are calling on these countries to reverse their decision and recommit to the principles of the Ottawa Treaty. These groups also fear a domino effect. When established members of a powerful military alliance like NATO abandon a key humanitarian treaty, it weakens the international norm against the weapon. It sends a message to other countries that it is acceptable to use landmines again. This could lead to a global resurgence in the production and use of these weapons, reversing the significant decline seen since the treaty was signed. The progress made in clearing land and assisting victims could be undone as new mines are laid in new conflicts around the world. The core of their argument is that security should not come at the cost of fundamental human decency. They contend that there are alternative ways to defend a border that do not involve using weapons that maim children indiscriminately. Investing in advanced surveillance technology, anti-tank guided missiles, and well-trained professional armies are more humane and effective solutions, they say. For these organizations, the return to landmines is not a sign of strategic strength, but a moral failure and a dangerous concession to fear that will have tragic consequences for generations to come. The return of landmines to Europe marks a profound change in military thinking and signals a grim new chapter in the continent's history. It shows that the lessons from the war in Ukraine have been learned, but they are harsh lessons. The focus of military strategy is shifting away from fast, mobile warfare and back towards static, defensive attrition. Building impenetrable walls of fire and steel is once again seen as the key to national survival. This has major implications for how armies are structured, trained, and equipped, with a renewed emphasis on engineering, artillery, and the ability to breach complex obstacles. For the people living in these border regions, the future is now filled with uncertainty and fear. The creation of a 2,000-mile mined barrier will transform their landscape and their lives. It will restrict movement, divide communities, and turn familiar fields and forests into no-go zones. While governments promise safety and security, residents will be living on the edge of a permanently militarized frontier. The psychological weight of living next to a hidden, deadly threat will be immense. This decision prioritizes state security over the safety and freedom of the very citizens it aims to protect. This strategic shift away from the Ottawa Treaty also has broader geopolitical consequences. It highlights a growing tension between national security interests and international humanitarian law. In an increasingly unstable world, countries are beginning to question their commitment to treaties that they feel restrict their ability to defend themselves. The choice made by these 5 NATO nations could weaken the entire framework of international arms control, making the world a more dangerous place. It suggests a future where military necessity increasingly trumps long-term human security. In conclusion, Europe is bringing back landmines because a new sense of existential threat has taken hold. The war in Ukraine has demonstrated their brutal effectiveness as a defensive tool, and countries bordering Russia now see them as a necessary evil. However, This is a deal with the devil. While mines may deter an invasion, they will leave deep and lasting scars on the land and its people. This choice represents a tragic reversal, sacrificing the hard-won promise of a mine-free world for the grim security of a fortified continent. Europe is building a wall, but it is a wall that will wound itself for generations.